In the last class, we had discussed about ASP.NET, and we just saw how to create some controls, and we had done a registration form with some controls taking input from the user. Now, before we proceed in today's class, there are a few things which I would like to just recollect, or so that you remember all these things with respect to a web technology. Okay. Normally in a web technology, in a website, whatever you see in a website, okay, earlier it was not so dynamic, it was mostly static pages. All right, so when I say mostly static pages, it's like most of the time the websites were used to just give information to the user. Okay, just to say that this is available here, and we have these features, and we are an established company, like that. It was just used as a medium of giving information over the internet. That's the idea, because hypertext transfer protocol. So it's basically mentioning, or it's supposed to pass information in a very beautiful manner over the internet so that everybody can access it. But now I think recently you see that internet is not just giving information, rather you can also put your own information there. Okay, so there is a lot of give and take here, which means we create, or we generate a lot of content on the internet, okay, which leads to your big data, and then you also consume a lot of data by just going through some people's posts, and like Instagram, Facebook, we go through a lot of data in a particular day. All right, so all these are connected, or all these are available through the internet. Now, why am I telling this is because most of the time we develop websites predicting or expecting information from the user. All right, so when it comes to getting information from the user, normally we need to make sure that we ask the user a particular like a form. Okay, we give a form to the user, let him fill it, and then once he clicks on submit, we do something with that data. So in order to get the data, we use form tags, and we use a lot of HTML controls to get the, or input controls to get the data. Now, we have discussed a few, and the most important part of getting data from the user is not just putting some input controls, rather validating all those things. Okay, so in today's class, all I'm going to discuss is validation. Okay, so how do I do that in ASP.NET? All right, before we go to ASP.NET validation, we should see how normally validations are done. All right, so I'm going to take up two scenarios. All right, and the reason is because validation has two types. There are two types of validation in general. I'm not talking about ASP.NET, guys. In general, validation has two types. One is client side, the other one is server side. I hope this is getting to you. All right, please understand that there are two types of validation. One is client side, the other one is server side. What do you mean by client side validation? What language do you use to perform that? And what is server side validation, and what language do you use to perform that? Okay, to keep this simple, client side validations are normally, all right, normally done using JavaScript. I hope this is clear. When some people might remember the word jQuery validations or validators. All right, doesn't matter. Whatever you call, they all basically belong to one language called JavaScript. You can call it jQuery. You are using some other technology, some other .js file in order to perform this validation. Doesn't matter. You are basically using JavaScript, which runs on your client's browser to validate data entered by the client. Okay, that is much simpler. Okay, client side validation. Then there is server side validation. What do you mean by that? That you cannot use JavaScript. Where there is a scenario arising where you cannot use just client side validation scriptings like JavaScript, then you will have to bring in server side technology like PHP, JSP, ASP.NET, like that. Okay, just let's take some scenario. Imagine if you would like to ask the user to enter your name. All right, so my validation here is he should enter something. He cannot leave that space or that particular control blank and click on submit. If he clicks on submit, I would like to inform him this field is required. You have to enter something there. For this, what should I use? Can I use, please look at the question. Can I use both client side and server side for this? Can you answer that? I hope you got my question. To check whether the user has entered something or the other in that text box. Let's say enter your name. I'm asking enter your name. and the user has not entered anything and the user clicked on submit. I would like to inform the user, you have to enter, this is a required field, you have to enter before we proceed. How do I use that? What should I use that? Can I use JavaScript? Can I use server-side scripting like PHP, JSP? Which one should I use? Client side. Okay, perfect. My question is, can I not do that with server side? Can I do it with server side technology? What I just asked, can I do it with server side technology? Yes, of course. All right. Okay. So you are understanding what I'm saying. Okay. But exactly, you would not use it. You would not use server side technology to do that. I hope you get the reason, right? The reason is that I have to go back to the server, give the data what the user has entered, which is null, nothing, and then the server should respond saying, "Oh, you have not entered anything. Please enter something." This is a round trip. Entire internet round trip is required just to check whether the user has entered something or not. Now here, I would not prefer using server side. I would prefer using client side. I hope you get the idea. Like that, let me give you some scenarios. You tell me which one should I use for that particular scenario. Okay. Now there is a radio button. I've asked the user to choose male, female or transgender, something like that. And the user has not chosen anything and directly is clicking on submit. I would like to tell him you have to choose any one of those. All right. So what side technology should I use? Client side, server side? Which one should I use? Client side. Perfect. Okay. So which means you are forcing the user to choose something. You have to use client side technology. Please understand this. It's not like I cannot use server side. I can, but I won't. All right. The reason is because server side is a round trip. You need to go to server once again, which is kind of sensitive, right? Okay. Not in a small application, but think of whatever we are developing in an app. We were developing in an app is actually a local, which means within that phone only it all worked. So you never bothered about the number of users accessing that particular app, right? Because in one phone, one app will be used by one user only. So it's not a big deal. But when it comes to a website, always think what we are using, what we are developing might be accessed by many people at the same time. All right, so round trip to the server should be avoided as much as possible. We should try to do everything using JavaScript and client-side technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. When it demands server, then we should go to the server side. Okay, so that is one. And let's say that if I have a drop down, okay, of courses, and you would like to ask the user to choose one thing. Okay, you have kept a dummy value called select on top, and you have given MCA, MBA, all those things. And I would like the user to choose something apart from that word select, because select is already there on the top, right? So it's already selected. Apart from that, I would like you to choose something else. Okay, so for this, what side technology should I use? Client side or server side? Client side. I hope you get the idea, right? Okay, now another scenario. I would like the user to enter an email address. Okay, there are two things, guys. When I say valid email address, okay, and working email address are not the same. Valid email address is whether it follows that particular regular expression, right? So for this, to just check, I'm asking the user to enter an email address to check whether that email address is in a proper format, like some text at something dot something like that. It should be there. For this, what should I use? Client side or server side? I hope you understand my question. For email address, to check whether it is proper format, which means he has given it in a particular way. Okay, some text, something at. Okay, for that, again, client side. I hope you get this. All right. Now, let me give another scenario. You are going to sign up in a website, okay, like for example, Instagram or Facebook or some place where they require a username. All right. So I'm typing a username. I'm putting Thomas. Okay. I get a message without even submitting the page. I get a message saying that this name is already taken. That's also validation, guys, correct? Because I need to make sure that the user, the one username what I'm giving is not already taken by somebody else. Which means as soon as you finish entering a particular desired username, I need to check whether that name is already taken by somebody. And if it is already taken, I should say, no, it's not allowed. Okay. For this, what technology should I use? Client side or server side? Can I use client side technology for this? No. Okay, I hope you are on the right track. So you can understand what I'm saying, right? So, which means for these kind of validations, specifically based on the scenario, I would choose which one is more effective for me. Okay, if there are certain things which I can make JavaScript take decision, I would obviously give it to JavaScript because it's much faster. It runs on my client's machine. I will make sure that as much as possible, I'll give you valid data. Okay, but imagine if the data which you are trying to validate it against is available on the server, then you require a server side technology. Now, I hope you get the idea between a client side validation and a server side validation. Now, when you will see here, I'm going to create a simple web form. Okay, here using ASP.NET, and I'm going to create a full-fledged registration form. Okay, once again, I'm going to do a registration form, but this time with validation. Okay, now I'm going to show you how validation we have done so far. I'm not going to show that. I think you already know, you have done it in a lot of technologies. Okay, we would probably use HTML5. We'll just put that tag attribute called as required. All right, and sometimes we have input type equal to. We can put type equal to email, type equal to number. Like that, we can try to make sure that the validation works. But that validation is not so effective. I hope you know that. Okay, the validation which we use from HTML5 might not be much valid. The reason is there are browsers which still don't support HTML5. Okay, when I say still don't support, in the sense older systems which have not been upgraded and which do not support HTML5, those systems would still allow you to enter whatever you want. Okay, so please understand that the world is not completely changed into HTML5. There are still machines which only understands HTML4. HTML5, it becomes just like what do you call it? Input type equal to text. Everything is input type equal to text in a HTML4 browser. All right. So how do I perform validations in ASP.NET? Now, as usual, ASP.NET is made it, or it's built on .NET framework, which makes your entire work easier, because whatever hard work we need to do with respect to JavaScript is taken care by .NET, which means you just need to drive it. You just need to inform what I'm looking for in this particular registration page. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a simple registration form, and let me go about it. So let me just, please note, I created a simple web application with web forms, which means I have a template ready. Okay, and I have some pages already there. I am just going to add one ASPX page. So let me just right click on the project and say add new item. Let me just add a web form. Please note, if I choose a normal web form, I would not get this template what is already given by ASP.NET. I have to choose with the master page. All right, and here let me just name it as register.aspx, and let me add it. It's gonna tell me to choose the master page. Let me just choose site.master and then click on OK. So I have a simple page. Okay, so let me just go to the design. Let me not keep the source code. The design is this much only. All right, so there is some tab here, and then there is the main content. Okay, you can ignore this overlap here, because when you run, this overlap will not be there. This is only shown during design time, so do not worry about this overlap what you see here. Okay, you can just still drag and drop and check the output when you run it, not while you're designing it. Okay, so let's begin. I am going to put something called as a web control. All right, so I want you to understand the names what I'm going to use here. Okay, so let me see, there are some controls available here, right? In the toolbox, if you see, there are some controls which are given here. Now, I want you to be very clear of what is a normal web control, or in other words, HTML control, and what are server controls. Okay, there are two types of controls in that entire list. There are server controls as well as there are HTML controls. Okay, I've told this once in the beginning of the ASP.NET session, but remember, let's just see that once. What is the difference between these two? Okay, it's very simple. Let me open the source code part so that you can easily see this. Okay, so the tag which you see there, okay, please note this is going to be entirely just tags only, right? ASPX is going to be completely tags. Now look at the tag. Okay, it's very simple to understand what are server side tags and what are client side tags. Whatever tag begins with the prefix of ASP. Okay, it's simple, right? Just understand that if you start a tag which says less than ASP colon something, it can be anything, doesn't matter. Okay, there is no such control called as ASP in HTML. So what is that ASP control? What you see there is a server side control. Okay, ASP normally is server side control. So if I drag and drop something from the standard list of controls, let's say button, I'm dragging and dropping a button inside somewhere. Okay, it doesn't matter. Just to see this, this is a button, and also I am going to drag and drop a button from HTML part button. Let me drag and drop it. Okay, now I hope you can see both the code which is there. Ignore the errors and warnings and stuff. Just look at the code. All right. The first one, what you see, and the second one, what you see, both are not the same. Both will be understood by the browser as the same because it's going to get translated later. But look at this now. Okay. One thing to be very clear here is this keyword. Okay. This tag will only run at server, whereas this tag is my plain HTML tag, which means I don't require a translator for a language which I already speak. I hope you follow this, right? HTML is the language spoken by my browser, which means if I am talking to a browser in HTML, I need not translate it. Rather, this is not HTML. ASP colon button is not HTML. It is ASP.NET control. It's a server side control. Now, can I pass this to a browser directly and expect the browser to understand? No, obviously not. So what should I do? I should convert this or translate this back to HTML so that my browser understands. That is why we specifically have told run at server, which means you run this control in the server and give me a HTML equivalent of this particular control. Okay, this is just a revision. I hope you understand what the difference between these two controls are. And this control can be easily manipulated by C#. This cannot be easily manipulated by C# unless you use request response, all those extra things. Okay, so remember that. Now let me delete these things and let me go back to the form. Okay, so I want to generate or design a form in which I am going to create a simple registration page, and I am going to ask the user to enter some details. Okay, and based on the details what he enters, I'm going to validate before I submit this to C#. Okay, so C# is going to process the data what you are going to enter, but validation I need not use C#. I hope you get this. Okay, so let's go and first create a simple form. For that, I'm going to HTML and I'm going to take a HTML table. Okay, this table is only used for my design. Okay, I don't recommend using tables. You can use divs with Bootstrap, Grid, or Flexbox, whatever you want to use. That's HTML, CSS. Okay, it has nothing to do with .NET. Okay, Bootstrap. If you're using, if you're going to use Flexbox for the design, for the grid structure, whatever you want to use, you can use it without interfering with ASP.NET's way of structuring. For example, here I'm going to use a HTML table. And inside that table, the content will come from ASP.NET. Let's do that. So let me just drag and drop a table. Okay, I'll get 3 rows and 3 columns, just like this. 3 rows, 3 columns. Okay. Now, the reason why ASP.NET gives you 3 rows and 3 columns. Okay, 3 rows is your wish. You can keep adding how many ever rows you want. But imagine why .NET is giving you 3 columns. Okay, the first column normally will hold, because this is like a form, the first column will hold the label. Let's say, for example, enter your name. Okay, so I'm going to type that out here. I'm going to say enter your name. And the second one is going to be a text box that I can drag and drop from standard controls. You can see from the standard list of controls, I can drag and drop a text box. Now, there might be a question saying that there is an input type equal to text here in HTML. What if I use this? Okay, there is input type equal to text. This is also a text box. This is also a text box, right? So why would I use a server-side control? Why can't I just use an input type equal to text? Okay, there is a reason. If you use input type equal to text, this one, the HTML part which is there, the manipulation in C# might be a bit more complicated. I hope you get it. Okay, if you would like to access that data using C# without doing much work, then I suggest use an ASP.NET text box. not a HTML text box. If you use HTML text box, you will have to submit the page. You will have to see whether the page is submitted or not, and then use the request object to get the data which is passed as a get or post method. This is too much of work, right? So instead of that, if I just use a text box, if I drag and drop this and control and use this, I can directly access it with the text box's name. That's what .NET brings to the table. Okay, so I can easily bring data of a particular control to the C# part or the server side part without much work. That's why I normally prefer using ASP.NET standard controls, okay, not HTML controls. HTML, we'll try to use it only for design and wherever you want to just plain information to be put. Here, I would like manipulation of data. I would use standard text box. Okay, so let me just drag and drop a text box in the second column. This is the second column. Okay. What about the third column then? Okay. The third column is there to hold your validation controls. Okay. So let's think there are three columns here. The first column will hold the label. Second column will hold the control itself, which takes the input. Third column will be hidden normally, but will come up when you make a mistake or when you are not giving a proper data as information there. Okay. So let me just do that now. I'll do the validation a little bit later. First, let me just design the form. Okay. So first thing is I am going to use, I've asked the user to enter his name. Second thing, I'm going to ask the user to enter his password. But this time I am going to make it like a regular way. I'm going to say enter password. In most of the websites you would have seen this. First, they ask you to enter password. For that, I need a text box. So let me put a text box. After that, immediately they'll say retype password. Just to confirm, because you're not able to see what the user is typing there, right? So just to confirm from your side that I've put retype password. So I've put name, password, retype password. Okay. Then let me also put, by the way, I am not putting all registration form what we are looking for. I am just putting so that I can explain validation controls in ASP.NET. Okay, so these things are done. Then I am going to use, okay, let's say that I'm asking the user to enter his age. So enter your age. Okay, again, that will be in a text box. All right, let me just press tab and let me go to the next one. And here, let me just say choose your gender. Here, I can put a radio button list. And let me just give male and female. Okay, I have two controls. Next, so gender is done. And let me just ask the user to choose your course. That let me keep it as a drop down list. So let me just put a drop down list. Again, edit items. The first item, I'm going to keep it as dummy, which is just the word select. This is not an actual data what I'm looking for. Select. Next, let me put MCA, MBA, MSc, ST, MSc Big Data. All right. So I've just put some controls and that part is done. Course is done. Then let me ask the user to enter your email address. Okay, so let me just drag and drop a text box. That's also done. All right. Now I think these are most of the validations. What are the validations we normally do? I think this is enough. Okay, if you want, we can also add later. You see that without writing any lines of code, we can create a form so fast and so quickly here in ASP.NET. I'm just going to put a button. Right later, if we have other controls, we can add that also. All right. Now, this is a form. Okay, simple registration form. I've not asked much details, only a few details, but let's try to apply validation to this form. Okay, so how do I apply validation? For that, let's go to the toolbox once again and look for controls called validation. I hope the screen is visible. All right, so you can see there are different, not the pointer apart from that. Okay, there are 6 validation controls available from ASP.NET. Okay, before we begin, let me just categorize them. Okay, basically there are four important validation controls. okay, which are from the client side. Now, I'm just going to tell about each and every validation control which is there in short terms. Then we will see it in working. We'll apply it. Okay. Let's start with the first and foremost validation control, required field validator. Okay. What do you mean by this required field validator? There are some places, okay, where you would like the user to enter something. He cannot leave it blank. Okay, that's all. Very simple validation. You cannot leave this particular place blank. You cannot leave it empty. In other words, for that we use required field validator. Okay, only for that. Please don't misunderstand with other validation controls which are there. This validation controls only work is to make sure that you have entered or chosen something in that control what this validator is taking care of. All right. So please note the name of this control, validator. Okay, the one who validates, that's all. The only work of the validator is to validate a particular control what you have given to it. Now I am going to do that with the name. Okay, so name, how the name should be I cannot say, because name can be, I mean, only thing I can impose there is that you cannot have numbers. But apart from that, basically write something. It's your name. I don't care what is written there. But then as long as it's a valid data which is entered, which is not empty, that's all. Okay, for that, I'm going to use a required field validator. How do I do that? Okay, so that is first one. Let me just give a glance of this, then we'll do the working. So first one is required field validator, just to make sure that the data is entered or not. That's all. Okay, chosen or entered, something like that, not to leave it blank. Second control, compare validator. Okay, what do you mean by a compare validator? Best example is in front of you. Password, retype password. Now, if I want to check whether the password entered in the first box and the second box are same. Okay, please note this is just one requirement, one example of a compare validator. How do you compare? Equal to, less than equal to, greater than equal. This is how you compare. Okay, so here we are checking whether enter password, what you have entered there, and retype password, what you have entered there, are same. If they are same, this compare validator will be okay. If they are not the same, it will not be okay. I hope you follow. Okay, that's the work of a compare validator. Where else can you use this compare validator? There are some places, let's say for example, they are asking you to enter, let's take marks. Okay, there are some websites in which you, when you, let's say, we're applying for a job or something, there are some websites which will ask your 10th marks or +2 marks without language, with language. Okay, just think like this. Okay, just as an example I'm giving. All right, so the marks which you got without languages, okay, cannot be more than with the languages. That's a logical conclusion, right? So you can compare whether the mark what they have entered is less than the one which is without languages. Okay, just an idea. So you can compare two controls. Okay, so the moment you say compare, it will not be on a one control. Okay, required is on one control. You just say one control. If you say enter your name, this control you have to enter something. That's all. That's required field. Compare takes two inputs. You give two controls to me. I will compare those two controls and tell you what they are, whether they are same, whether they are different. Okay, those things. Now, whatever I am telling right now, guys, the first four, what I said, all are client side validators. Okay, again, I'm repeating, they are all client side validator. What do you mean by client side validator? When you drag and drop this control here in design of ASP.NET, they'll be like an ASP.NET control. But when you run this, there is no such thing as ASP.NET control on the browser. So what would these controls convert into? These controls would convert into appropriate JavaScript as soon as you run them on the browser. Okay, we'll see them shortly. That's the working I'm talking about. But while you're designing or developing a website, you will not be bothered about it. You'll just drag and drop and you'll finish your website within 5 minutes. You can finish this entire registration form within 5 or 10 minutes. You can maximum take to create a full-fledged validated form. Okay, since I'm explaining it one by one, I'm taking so much time. Otherwise, I can do this entire form within 5-10 minutes and registration will be over. Okay, so let's do that. Compare validators for that. I'm going to use that. Okay, third one, we are going to see something called range validator. Now, We have already come across this range kind of validations in HTML5, if you notice. Uh, Imagine if I say input type equal to number, min is equal to 10 and max equal to 50. If you put this, it will make sure that you have entered minimum 10 and maximum as 50. Without that, first of all, it will not take anything apart from a number. Second thing is that the number should be between this and that. This is allowed in HTML5 recently, but .NET, ASP.NET was available from when? Okay, from 2002 onwards, it's available, but you see that time onwards, we had this validation control, which means to check that range of value which is entered. Okay, but in HTML5, you have a limit of only with numbers. But when it comes to ASP.NET, it can have a range validation between numbers, between strings, between dates. Okay, I hope you follow. I'll show that shortly. But then remember, range validator. The input should be within the range of whatever you decide. Minimum, what is the value? What is the maximum value? You can tell that min and max, and it will be between that particular range. That is range validator. The next validator, regular expression. You guys already know the word regular expression. You give a regular expression, and I am going to see whether what you have entered in that text box is matching that regular expression. That's all. So the only requirement to use that validation regular expression validator is that you should know regular expression. That's all. You need not map it saying that if the user entered data which is there in text box is equal to, or if it follows the pattern which I am mentioning as regular expression, then it is validated. You need not write any of those code. There is no coding absolutely required for all these controls. Okay. That's the fourth control. So basically I've talked about 4 controls now. I'll just tell once again: required field, compare, range validator, regular expression validator. These are the 4 controls. Now, if you ask, there are 2 more there. What about them? Okay. The last one, what you see is summary. It's not a validation control as such. Rather, it is just a summary of all these validations. You would have seen this in most of the websites, that when you click on submit, whatever problem is there in that website will be on the top. Okay, once you click on submit, it will list out like bullet points. It will tell name was not there, password was not in this limit, and the email address was not proper. All these things, if it just gives you a summary of all problems in your page, it's called validation summary. We'll be using all these things. Okay. Today, what I'm now going to discuss today alone is custom validator. Okay. Please note that there is one more validation control called custom validator. What do you mean by custom? All right. Apart from all these validations, what we just spoke about, if you have your own validation, okay, which is not falling under regular expression, which is not falling under range or required or compare, you want to create your own validation. What should I do? Custom validator. Now, so basically, if you exclude that validation summary, there are 5 controls, right? Excuse me. There is required, there is compare, there is range, there is regular expression. Okay, 4 of these controls are client side validation controls. Please remember this. All these 4 what I just discussed: required, regular, range, compare. All these 4 validator controls would generate JavaScript, which means they are client side technologies, client side validators. By the way, when you drag and drop, they'll be .NET. When they come to the browser, they become JavaScript. I hope you follow. All right. What about custom validator? Custom validator, as the name goes, it is your wish. You can either use client-side validation or you can use server-side validation. Okay, it is entirely up to you to choose which side validation you would like to perform upon a custom validator, which I will take in the next class. Today, we'll only focus on client-side validation. These are 4 important controls plus 1 extra validation summary. Let me do this. Okay, let me quickly do first one, name. Okay, let's say that this is my validation first. Enter your name. I would like to make sure that the users cannot submit unless he enters something in this text box. Okay, that's all. Very simple requirement, right? So what should I do? I need a required field validator. Okay, I need a required field validator just to make sure that the user name, what he enters here, okay, the name what you enter here cannot be blank. You type something and then you press submit, I will take it. Okay, so let me just drag and drop a required field validator, not next to the control, because I already have a column here, the 3rd column. So let me just put it in the 3rd column. That's it. It looks something like this. First, your name. Second, the control. Third, the validation control. Now, we have a requirement, right? I don't want to see that word till the user makes a mistake. Okay, I don't want to see a validation error till the user has made a mistake. Without him submitting the page, why should I show validation problems? I hope you understand. Okay, so the first time you run, I would like to see a blank form. And the moment you click on submit, I would like to tell the user you have not entered. Okay, not as soon as you open the page, I should say you have not entered anything. Okay, so that is something which we need. We need not even write the code. It automatically understands. Okay, which means it will not be shown to you unless you click on the submit button and that control is blank. So let's first, just because I dragged and dropped it doesn't mean that it will be mapped to this control. You will have to map it manually. How do I map it? Okay, all I did was I just dragged and dropped a validation control. Now let me go to its properties. Before I go to property, let me go to the source code so that I can show you how those controls are manipulated. Here, the first TD says enter your name. The second TD has ASP colon text box, a server side control, a text box control. The third column you can see here has again an ASP.NET control. Okay, what's the control name? Control name is required field validator. Okay, please understand that this is not something which your browser understands. So when I run this, this should be converted or translated into something which my browser understands. All right, so we will see that how it does that. Okay, so now let me go back to its design. Okay, so I'm going to click on this validation control, go to its properties. Okay, now please note this will be an important question for you in theory also. What are validation controls and what are the important properties of these validation controls? All right, so a required field validator properties are very less. Okay, the number one property for your any validation control is very simple, the one which I have highlighted. Okay, please remember that word, control to validate. Which control would you like to validate by using this validator? Okay, validator is a control. Which control would you like to validate using this validator? Okay, now comes the, now you can see or understand what is the importance of naming a control appropriately. Okay, what is important, why should I name a control appropriately is now you'll understand which control to validate. Please note there are so many controls on my form. Let me just open that drop down and see what are the things available. Okay, does this make sense to us? All right, because I have only one drop down list, one radio button list, very easy to understand what they are. But if you see the remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, text box 1, text box 2, like that it is there. There is no sense. Okay, if I'm working with a bigger form, this is a small registration form. If I'm working with a huge registration form, this would be more annoying for me to understand what control am I talking to right now. So obviously all the time name your controls appropriately. So let me quickly finish that now. Let me click on the first control. I'll name it as txt name. Second control is password. So let me name it as txt pswd. And the third control is also password, but it is repeat password. So I'll put txt repswd, repeat password. All right, the next one is age. Okay, so let me just put txt age. And the next one is radio button list. I'll just put it as RBL gender. The next one is a drop down list. So let me just put DDL course. The last one is an email address. So let me just put txt email. All right. So now I have all these controls appropriately named. I'm not changing much properties here. Last one is the button. So let me just put btn submit. And also I'll change the text to say register. Done. And let me just put a class also, btn hyphen success, so that it looks like a HTML, bootstrap control. So I have a register button and I have these controls available here. And since most of them are text boxes, let me just choose all these text boxes. I think I'll also choose this radio, drop down list. And I'll also put a CSS class saying form hyphen control. That's the bootstrap way of changing or modifying its design, the look and feel. Okay, so anyway, I have these controls ready, and let me just begin the first one, required field validator. Okay, so let me just choose that. And now let me go back to the properties. Okay, if I go to the properties now, the first property I need to change is the control to validate. Now, if I open the drop down, I can understand which one is what. Okay, by just looking at the name, I can understand. So the first one is the name. So I'll just choose txt name. Done. That's the first important property which you need to tell to a required field validator. Not only required field, any validation control you use, if you miss this control to validate property, your page will not run. Your page will throw an error. Okay, no, don't think it's a warning, it's an error, which means if I don't give control to validate and I put a validator, the entire purpose of the validator is gone, which means it will throw a server side error. You will get 500 error. I hope you follow the server side error 500 you will be getting. The reason is this is a very, very important control, also very, very important property. They both go together. Okay, so that is one. Second thing is the message. What message do you like to show to the user? Okay, right now it's just saying required field validator. That's the default value. Let me delete it. Let me just put name cannot be empty. That's it. Okay, can you see this? I just get the text to be name cannot be empty, and it is in black color. Normally validations will not be in black color. I would like to show it in red color so that the user takes it a little bit more seriously, right? So let me just change the color, 4 color. Let me just type the word red and press enter. That's all. I don't want to choose. You can also choose from a big list. Okay, or you can just type the word red and it comes as red color. All right, now you can see that the validation control is right there. Okay, a control is there. It is going to check whether this name has been entered, and then you click on submit. Okay, that's all. And this error message should come if the user presses register without entering anything in the text box. Let me just check whether it works or not in the meantime while the project is running. Okay, so when I run right now, if I click on submit directly without entering any of these, none of these controls will have a problem except the first control, because the first control has been asked to be validated by a validator. Okay, so let me just check whether it works. Then we'll go to the remaining ones quickly. All right, so the page is ready, and you see my form is here, but you don't see the validation control what I dragged and dropped. Please see that the word name cannot be empty, that is not there. But if you go to the design, in the design it is there, name cannot be empty, but when I run I don't see it. Okay, so when will I be able to see that validation control? When you try to submit this page without entering anything in this text box. Please note, I have not entered anything else. I have not chosen the gender, I have not chosen course, I have not entered email, no password, no age, nothing. I'm just clicking on register. What normally should happen is that the page should refresh, that's all. Okay, that's what we normally expect, because this is a submit button now. Okay, so let me just open the source and I'll just show you that last button, submit. Okay, you can see that input type equal to submit has been created, which means when I click on this button, I would like the page to be submitted. When the page is going to get submitted, if there is no validation, it'll just submit the page. And since you have not written any code, it'll just refresh and come back to you. But now it will not be the same. Let me click on register. I get an error here. I hope you can see this, right? All right, so let me just zoom a little bit. You see that I have enter your name, and I didn't enter anything, and I just clicked on submit. It's not allowing me to submit because it's blocked from the client side. Till you enter the name, enter something there, it will not go away. But now let me just enter something. Okay, and then go to the next control. Please note that the validation control understands that you have entered something and it goes away. Now when I click on register, the page you can see here to make the difference. Okay, I'm going to click on register. You see that the page was submitted and the page got refreshed, but nothing is written. I didn't write any C# code, so it's just refreshing and coming back. Okay, but if I remove this and press on submit, I will be getting an error. This is required field validation. Okay, and it is compulsory for using in some controls where you would like the user to enter something. Now please note, I have not used the word required. What do you call your HTML5 required? This will work in any browser. This doesn't have a requirement that you have to have an HTML5 enabled browser. Any browser you take up, you will not be able to run this particular program without entering something in the text box. Okay, this is a required field validator. Let me quickly go back and let's do something else also. I'll take at least one more control now. See here, the next one is enter password, retype password. These both should not be a normal text. They should be taking passwords there. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the text mode of these two from single line to password. Okay, so all I've done here is I've just told these two text boxes must be in the mode of password. Done. Okay, so first thing I've done, but this is not validation. What I did is not validation. It is just logic, right? So I'm just going to make these two as passwords so that people can't see what they're typing. But since once they're finished typing, I would like to make sure that both are same. Okay, please understand that I would like to make sure that both are same. So what control should I use? I should use a compare validator. Okay, now I am going to purposely make this mistake of putting only compare validator. You are going to find out what is the mistake I've made. Okay, so I'm going to just drag and drop a compare validator in the second place because I'm going to compare these two. So you can put it anywhere. I just put it here so that there's a gap. Now let me go back and let me choose that validator and let me go to its properties. What are the properties of a compare validator? Compare validator has two important properties. Okay, as I already told you, compare means can be done with only two people, right? Not one person cannot compare himself. So we'll just say control to compare, control to validate. All right, so please note you have two controls. What is the compare which, what is the control which I am validating, and what is the control which I am comparing it to? Okay, it's very simple. I am validating the second text box. I'm comparing it with the first text box. I hope what I said is clear. Okay, there are two important properties for a compare validator. Okay, one is control to validate. The other one is control to compare. Okay, but if you go to control, required field validator, there is only one thing very important there: control to validate. There's nothing to compare. You're just saying validate what? Validate it with what? Empty. If it is empty, throw that error. That's all. But when it comes to compare, you are going to take two things. One, control to validate. Second one, control to compare it with. Here, I am validating the second text box, the retyped password. And where am I comparing it with? The type password. I hope you follow, right? I need to do these two things. How do I do it? Okay, so let me click on the compare validator. And what control should I validate? I wanted to control validate the retype password. Where do you want me to compare it with? Password. Now, does it make a difference if I put the reverse? Let's say control to compare is repeat password and control to validate is password. No, because I'm trying to check whether both are same. So this doesn't matter. But if you are writing code for comparing whether it is less than or greater than, something like that, then this makes a difference. Right now, it doesn't make a difference. Just choose these two passwords. Okay. Now, the second thing is, okay, the two important properties you have done. The third important property is what operator you would like to put on them. Okay, what are you trying to check? Okay, what are you trying to compare it as? Do you want these two to be equal, not equal, greater than, less than? Just open this, you will find this. Okay, you have equal, not equal, greater than equal, less than equal, or just a data type check whether both are same data type or not. That we can ignore. But just see that here I am trying to check whether they both are equal. So I'm not going to change it, but depends on what you are looking for. Okay, here I am looking for both to be equal. Password, repeat password, both should be equal. Simple. That's it. Now message, what message should I show if it is not equal? I'll just say passwords don't match. That's something which I can give. That's all. And let me also give the 4 color as red so that it just shows an error saying that passwords don't match. All right, so I hope you follow. Okay, if I type ABCD here and XYZ here, they both should not match. Okay, and this error will be triggered. Let me just check. Let me run once again. Okay, the page is starting. All right. Now let me just directly go and click on submit and see whether that compare validator gets triggered or what are the validations which gets triggered. only one validation gets triggered now. Okay, I want you to understand this very clearly. When I clicked on submit, only one validation control got triggered. What is that validation? Required. Okay, what about the compare validator? Compare validator is happy. I'll tell you why. Okay, the reason is the password and retype password are same. I hope you follow. You did not tell that you have to enter something there. Your requirement is if both are same, then I'm okay with it. So if I just type the name part, something you type here, no problem. The page submits. You can see this place, the page submits. What about my compare validator? The compare validator is working according to your requirement. You said if the password and repeat password are same, then okay, you're okay with it, right? Right now they are same because this is blank, blank. Is blank equal to blank? Yes. So this validation will not be triggered unless you change the controls in both. So let me just do that. I'll just put something here and something else here. Then let me click on submit. Here comes the trigger. Okay, let me just remove this and put only one and click on submit. Okay, now it is resetting because it's a password field and you did not try to compare both. One was blank. It was not even saying that it was required. That is the work of the required field validator, not the compare validator. Compare validator will only check if both the data is entered. Okay, so whose work is it to check whether they have entered something? That is required field validator, which means you can apply 2 or 3 validators on one control. The compare validator is only going to focus on its work. It is not going to bother about somebody else's work. I hope you follow this, right? So how do I fix this problem? To just fix this, very simple. Put required field validator on one, which means you cannot leave these two things blank. All right, so let me just show you that. Let me just put a required field validator over here. How do I put that? Just go to the validation controls. Let me just drag and drop a required field validator and put it here. And let me go to the control to validate and then say password. Okay, what am I supposed to do? Password cannot be empty. I'll just put password cannot be empty. I'll change the 4 color to red. Done. Now, first control is compulsory. Okay, you have to enter this. Otherwise, required field will come. Okay, and please note I've given control to validate. If I don't put control to validate, your page will throw an error. Okay, so let me just show that. Now here, what about this place? Retype password. What should I do with the retype password thing? Okay, so here in the retype password place, I can apply two validations. One, I can say required field validator, also a compare validator. So let me just drag and drop a required field validator also in the same place. Okay, that the alignment we can see later. Just get the logic here. Required field validator. I am going to the control to validate. Now, before I give the control to validate, what if I just directly run the page? Because I told most of you will get this error because you will, when you work with a lot of controls, you might forget to do that. Okay, so please note I just dragged and dropped a validator. I did not give a control to validate. Let's see what happens. Okay, you would get this. Okay, it's not something which is like a great mystery to solve. It's very simple. It just says the control to validate property of the control which you dragged and dropped cannot be blank. It's a server error. It's not a 404, not page not found. It's a server error. Okay, so how do I fix this? Very simple. Go back to your program, click on that required field validator and also say control to validate is repeat password. Done. And here just say again repeat password or the password cannot be empty. I'll just say cannot be empty. Simple. 4 color, I'll just put red. Done. Now if I run the program, I would have got both of those validations properly, which means if I directly go and click on submit, okay, my required field validators will get triggered everywhere. Okay, let me just show you. I'm going to just click on register. All my required field validators have been triggered. Okay, the alignment I'll tell you later in the next class, but just see. All the required field validators are triggered. How do I fix the required field validator? By entering something. First you enter something. Okay, but now once you've entered something, passwords don't match. This is not required field. This is compare validator. Okay, I hope you follow. Right, so today we have seen two validation controls. One is required field validator, the other one is compare validator. Now, what if I enter same values here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. What about then? Then it is fine. It submits. It submitted and then the password fields went away. Okay, so with this, we have done two validation controls. In the next class, I'll continue with this validation controls and we'll finish all the validation controls in the next class. Okay, with this, we'll stop for today.